Welcome to Dollars and Cents, Creating Your Fulfilled Life with Nicole Romito from Private Vista. In this podcast, we draw from years of experience as well as guest specialists to help you create the life you imagine. Join us in this journey as we enlighten and empower you to align your lifestyle to help you achieve your goals with a clear picture of your future. Now, let's get to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Dollars and Cents podcast with Nicole Romito. Nicole, so good to be with you. I feel like I've been away from you for a long time. Nice to be back with you. How are you?
I'm doing great. I bet you couldn't sleep at all last night with the anticipation of being back in studio with me.
I kept waking up going, no, it's not time yet.
I knew it.
Huh?
I'm doing really well, Bill. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm doing great. Weather is getting warmer. Winter's going away.
Let's hope so.
I'm a very happy guy.
Mother Nature is very, very furious with us and a woman of many emotions. So I'm not going to say we're done with winter quite yet.
No, but my fingers are crossed and I keep making the required sacrifices. So
perfect. Better you than me.
We should be okay. So what's on tap today?
Yeah, I'm super excited. I think as you and our listeners know, I always get extra jazzed when I have one of my awesome colleagues in studio with me, and that is the case today. I'd like to say hello and welcome to one of my partners, Matt Parenti.
Hey there. How are you, Nicole? Good to be with you.
It's so good for you to be joining me. And what Matt and I are going to talk about is kind of all things executive compensation. Oh, I think our listeners know we deal with a few different types of clients. I've asked Matt to join me today because he specializes and heads up our group that has the pleasure of working with executives at both privately and publicly owned companies, of publicly and privately owned companies. And so what I've asked Matt to do is we're going to have a great conversation, really kind of around the ABCs of executive compensation, because it is anything but straightforward.
That's right. That's right.
So before we get into that topic, I just want to give our listeners a little bit of a bio on Matt. As I mentioned, he is a partner and lead advisor at Private Vista. He graduated from University of Illinois, and he had a major in financial planning with a minor in international studies. He has also earned his master's of finance from Notre Dame. And of course, as all of us do here at Private Vista, has the certified financial planner designation. Matt was initially drawn to the financial planning profession by his enjoyment of business, economics, and finance. However, he very quickly learned that helping people achieve their goals was the best part of this practice. And that really is what continues to get him up and going each and every morning. In the years since he started financial planning, he's learned to enjoy working with clients of varying situations. But as I've mentioned, he has found his specialty in helping corporate and startup executives and business owners really put together all the different pieces of their financial puzzle. In addition to helping clients, he certainly is a busy man. I don't know when he sleeps, but he is the chair of our growth and marketing committees, co-chair of our DE&I committee, and also a member of our investment product committee. I'm going to share a little personal thing. Again, I don't know how you're fitting this in, but I'm super excited. You and Molly are going to be getting married in a couple of months here.
That's right. Yeah.
And
a lot of coffee. So
yeah.
That was it. You said that about sleep. It's actually more about the coffee.
More about the caffeination.
Yes.
Great. Well, you're super busy on the work side. Maybe do you want to just share one or two things you enjoy doing personally when you're not helping out us or the clients at Private Vista?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, getting married in May to my fiance, Molly. We're getting married in Kansas City. Very excited about that. And planning has taken up a lot of time, but we're having a lot of fun with it.
Awesome.
Outside of that, love to get outdoors. I love skiing. I actually, a couple weeks ago, had a nice ski trip out west. So love anytime I can get outside and love going to northern Wisconsin and fishing, both in the summer and winter. So
okay.
Anytime I can be outside in the great outdoors, enjoying nature, that is my Private Vista.
That's awesome.
Yes.
That's awesome. I think that's why you always have such a sunny, positive attitude as well. So keep it up. It's working. All right. Well, thanks for sharing a little bit about yourself. Let's kind of just jump right in. As I mentioned, listeners, we're going to talk. This is such a meaty topic that we're going to have Matt with us for 2 episodes. So what we're going to talk about today is the profile of executives, the compensation, and what makes it so much more complicated and a bit hairy, if you will, when you're at this level. We're going to talk about kind of how we start to work with clients to make sure they're maximizing these plans. And then we'll go from there. So I know a lot of times I'll get comments from friends or family or even other clients who aren't corporate executives, and they'll say, gosh, why would they need to hire a financial planner, Nicole? I mean, they're running a business or they're running a line of business, obviously successful, smart people. So they're a little surprised when I'll say, yeah, we have clients who are CEOs or CFOs or CHROs. And it's a little bit of a head scratcher. So why don't we maybe start talking about the profile or maybe some of the contributing factors that you see when clients are coming to you and our colleagues who work in this area?
Sure. Yeah. And that is a great question because I often get the same reaction when I've talked to non-executive folks out there. Why would a super successful corporate executive or startup executive need a financial planner? Well, first, to answer the question about the typical profile of these sorts of people, they're typically very busy and very ambitious and smart. And given the time, they could probably figure out how to build a financial plan. The issue is there isn't a lot of time.
Right.
And the best way that these sort of folks can leverage their human capital is towards the business that they're in. And they lean on folks like us to manage their finances. Really, what I find is it's actually more important for folks like this to have a financial planner, particularly a financial planner that can act as maybe a quarterback or a CEO of their finances.
Exactly.
In the sense that we can coordinate between all of the different professionals that they work with. Most of these folks have a tax planner, an estate attorney. A lot of times they'll have personal attorneys to review contracts and employment lawyers. Having a financial planner that understands all of these different things is very important and can coordinate between all of the various professionals. The other important thing to coordinate here is with an HR person or a benefits person at their employer. When we at Private Vista work with an executive or someone in this space, we typically try to get to know someone at their company that deals with benefits so that we can help first ourselves understand that company's benefits to better help our client, but then also to help educate the client on what sort of benefits they have. Because as we'll discuss, there's a whole host of different ways that these folks are compensated and different benefits they have. So it really is key to have a financial planner that understands those things, can go through and pick out the specifics about that executive's plan and help them implement that into their own financial plan as part of it.
And that's the key point. Exactly what I wanted to add on to your comment is while the HR or benefits person, you would hope, would be well-versed on the plan, generally speaking, they don't have tax experience. They kind of might know how the plan document is written and maybe what other executives have done. But I would be very highly confident saying they're not going to know what the executive's whole financial plan is and maybe what they're trying to accomplish on the personal side. I can't imagine that they're going to be like, hey, Peggy, over my benefits person, I'm thinking of trying to get out of here in 5 years, right? So that might be one piece, but then also they might not share what they're trying to do for their next generation or the organizations they care about. And again, as you mentioned, really, how does this tie into my overall estate plan? And then how do I try to minimize the amount of taxes that I have to pay?
That's exactly right. Someone doesn't see the full picture. They can't maximize these benefits. And that's where a financial planner is very important.
Absolutely.
Because we help our clients see the whole picture and can help maximize these things based on what our clients are trying to achieve.
Yeah. And as you and I know, and I think our listeners know from different guests we've had on, I mean, that just like everything in this world is very fluid or ever evolving, certainly our tax code is. So
that's exactly right.
What might have been accurate or the best option last year may not be so for this year or years going forward. So I think you've laid it out really nicely of how we not only fit on the team, but generally speaking, are kind of coordinating the team to make sure everyone's rowing in the same direction for the executive. Why don't we maybe we've talked about there's all these different plans and things like that. But why don't we maybe start laying out the different ways that we see our executive clients being compensated? Because I think that'll start to lay the foundation or groundwork of, again, why it's so important to understand what are all the pieces and how do you best pull them all together?
It's important to recognize that typically people in these positions get paid based on their performance. They're brought in to help grow a company, or there might be some other specific goal of the company. And so they're brought in to achieve those goals. And because of that, they're compensated for that. So just like any other position out there, just base salary makes up the bulk of the annual compensation. But there's also other things that come in for
that are kind of layered on top
for the performance or growth aspect of it. Specifically, if you're dealing with publicly traded companies, the goal might be at the end of the day, and it sounds simple, but to raise the stock price.
Right.
So a way that many executives are paid are with stock in that company. And they're incentivized at the end of the day, very simply, to make the stock price go up. If the stock price goes up, they enjoy some of the benefit or a lot of the benefit of that price growth. There's a couple of ways they're paid in that way. One of the ways that can happen is in restricted stock. It's called restricted stock units, or RSUs. Those are just shares of the company that vest over a period of time, meaning that executive A might get 100 shares of their company, and the company might say, you get these over a period of 3 years. So 33 shares will vest in year 1, 33 shares will vest in year 2, and then the remainder will vest in year 3. And that does a couple of things. One, the executive will want the share price to go up so that those are worth more. The second thing is that the company will also get the sort of golden handcuff of, hey, if you're going to be here for a longer period of time, that these will vest while you're here. So if you were to leave after 2 years, you lose that third piece of it, that part that vests over the third year. The second common way that an executive is paid in stock is called stock options. Now, these are complicated or can be complicated tools, but what they are essentially is you are given the right to buy shares of the company at a set price. Let's say an executive gets hired and they're given 100 stock options in their company, the right to buy at $10. So what will happen is they'll get those stock options. They won't be worth much at the beginning, but if the price grows to, say, $20, when those options vest, the executive will have the right to buy the stock at $10 while the company trades at $20, meaning that $20 minus the $10 that it was granted at is profit for them. So again, another way them to be incentivized for the stock to go up. The third common way that executives will get paid in equity or stock in the company is performance stock. And this is very simply the company saying, we'll give you a certain amount of shares if you meet these performance metrics. If we get a certain amount of sales growth, we will give you X amount of shares. All three are ways to get paid on performance of the company, particularly as it relates to the stock price.
Yeah. And I think just to add on it, Matt, you did a really nice job of kind of high level, the three main categories. We all know from looking at these plans, they can be called 100 different things. We've seen LTIPs and LTIs and SARs and RSSs, RSUs, right? It really is important, I think, to highlight that when you are at this level or this type of compensation, that you're also working, your financial planner or your financial advisor has experience and a deep knowledge of this, because it's very different than what can be or typically is a straightforward 401k plan. So, you could be talking to your friend who's a CFO at another company and you both have LTIP plans, and they can work very differently.
Yeah, that's exactly right. For each person and at each company, these can be a little bit different. One of the other ways that executives can get paid that we haven't yet discussed is through deferred compensation plans.
Yes.
These are particularly common at publicly traded companies where 401k plans have certain testing limits where executives can't contribute large amounts to their 401k based on them making a certain amount of money, whereas the vast majority of the company makes less. There's some rules around it.
Right.
And so the way that the company will help an executive save for retirement outside of these 401k rules is through deferred compensation. And it's just simply we and you as the employee and us as the employer can put a certain dollar amount into an account every year, and that pays out to the executive once they leave the company over a certain period of time. For instance, me, the executive, and my employer can each put in 5 to 10% of my paycheck every year. That accumulates an account, and I can designate that to be paid over a period of time after I leave the company.
And I just want to clarify for our listeners, to build on your example, the 5 to 10% would go in pre-tax.
Exactly.
So you're not paying, this is a deferred comp. You're deferring taking your compensation, and therefore you're also deferring the income tax. And not only on your, generally, and I don't want to steal your thunder, so I'll keep my comments brief, but your contributions would go in pre-tax. And very similar to a 401k, your employer will have a list of investment options. And so you can invest those deferrals. Your growth is tax deferred. And then however it comes out, and I know on part 2, we're going to do a deeper dive into taxes, but you would be taxed at whatever your then current tax bracket is.
That's correct. One of the key differentials too between 401ks and deferred compensation is the way that they get distributed, where 401ks, once you leave the company and you're retired, you have a lot more control as to when 401ks are distributed to you in retirement, where deferred compensation, you have to make a designation on how that'll get paid years and years ahead of time. So actually, when you sign up for the plan or you make the deferral, you have to say at that time, I'll take this over, for instance, the first 5 years of my retirement. That creates some complications, which I know, as you mentioned, we'll talk about a little later on in terms of how you tax plan around that.
Hey, pardon the interruption. I know you are listening to Dollars and Cents, Creating Your Fulfilled Life with Nicole Romito, and we're happy you're here. If you have any questions, please head over to myprivatevista.com or the show notes to find out how to reach us. We'd love to hear from you.
Right. Do you want to touch on now or in our second episode about like you highlighted, you have a lot more flexibility on the 401k. So on the deferred comp, not only do you need to elect today, if you will, or when you're deciding to defer, how will I get it out? But then there's also IRS stipulations or restrictions about being able to change your mind later.
That's right. Occasionally you will be allowed to change how that gets distributed. And it is a maybe once you have the opportunity to do it. That means that doing proper planning up front is very important.
Yeah, I agree. And again, in the context of your overall plan, especially because these are usually decisions you're making now that maybe aren't going to happen for, I mean, at some point it could be 20, 30 years, but even if you're thinking shorter term or nearer term, 5, 10 years, and even though we're really good at planning, we know that not only does life evolve and change, but as Matt and I referenced, the tax code is constantly changing. So
that's exactly right. Yes.
I think that really lends into, Matt, maybe you want to share a little bit about, I feel that we find many of us, probably you and I as well, we've been programmed almost since birth, like defer taxes, don't pay now. That would be a horrible thing or a bad decision. But these plans can build quickly to very large balances. So how do you counsel your clients? I understand everything's specific to the client's situation, but maybe a few tips or highlights of how you have those conversations about balancing. It could be a great program, deferring taxes, but making sure you're not back end loading. So they're setting themselves up for a really large tax hit down the road.
Yes. And this goes back to what we talked about in terms of taking advice from someone who might not see the full picture. Is we talked about the other pieces of compensation that one of these individuals might have. Without the proper planning, without looking at a full timeline of when things vest, when things roll out, you can run into a really big tax bill down the road. I typically recommend looking at other areas where income might be coming in and what those timeframes are so that we can spread out the distribution from that deferred comp.
Okay.
So that we're not all in a 1 or 3 or a 5-year period. A lot of times people will just elect, I'll take my deferred comp at retirement. And what they find is that in the first year of their retirement, they have a huge distribution and they're in the absolute top tax bracket.
Which could be, because that's going to be taxed if your state has an income tax too. So you could be, close to 50 cents on the dollar, if not higher in some other states.
Yeah.
So.
And keep in mind at the same time, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, you'll also have stock that's vested that you might want to start to sell and diversify. There will be other things that cause tax
that are
that
generating tax consequences.
And
Great
so
point.
Yes, it's very important that these individuals look at the distribution periods that exist and try to coordinate that with all the other things in their portfolio, their plan, so that they could spread out when this income rolls out and thus reduce their tax over time.
That's a really good point. Because oftentimes for these type of clients, it's not just deferred comp or employer stock. There's a lot of other factors going on. And I know Matt and I always like to say it's both sides of the coin. There are pros and cons to every choice. And generally speaking, there's opportunities and vulnerabilities. So again, trying to figure out how you put it all together to maximize opportunities and reduce vulnerabilities. And while we're on the tax situation, I think we did want to talk a little bit about, we were hitting on the deferred comp, but do we maybe want to talk a little bit about some of the other complications or, maybe phrase that a little more positively, other considerations when you have this as a big part of your compensation package?
Absolutely. One of the key things that we mentioned in terms of compensation for executives is stock in their company, which is a great way to build wealth for these folks over time. The issue can become if that is a significant part of their compensation, it can lead to concentration in that one individual stock. Remember that if you're working as an executive at a publicly traded company and getting stock in the company, not only do you now have a large financial stake in the company in the sense that you've got a ton of company stock,
right?
Your human capital is also tied up in the company. And so you are really concentrated in that position in a number of different ways. One of the things I know we were going to touch on in the next episode is ways of reducing that, but that can be one of the complications of that in an area where we try to really help clients think through in order to make sure that we can reduce concentration risk over time.
Yeah. And I think oftentimes we'll see clearly, and it makes sense if you're dealing with the CEO, the CFO, the COO, you would hope they'd have confidence that they're helping run a great company. And they're like, yeah, we had 20% up last year, Matt. And I'm going to keep doing that year over year. So I know oftentimes they are willing to, if you will, bet on red or bet on themselves because they're in the boardroom. So they know what's going on and what's coming. How do you have those conversations where you're like, yeah, Nicole, I know you're doing a great job getting that stock price up, but how do you maybe educate them on how to take some of the chips off the table? Or I'm going to do 2 questions in one. Everyone loves the twofer. What if they're like, yeah, I'm ready to cash out. Like, I agree. I get my income here, my benefits. So this is how I'm keeping my family financial bus going. We see both sides, people who want to put it all in red and other ones who are like, no, it's a great company, but I want to start taking chips off the table. So you can't just decide I'm going to sell 1 million shares of my company stock this quarter.
That's right. There's a fine line. I'll take the first side of it first, which is the inability to fully liquidate. If someone were to say, I would like to take my chips off the table. For a lot of times, particularly with C-suite executives, they have a requirement for how much stock they have to hold in the company.
Right.
That varies from company to company, but generally for publicly traded companies, those companies are mandating from the board that these executives hold enough stock so that they have some skin in the game. They can't fully always sell out. The second thing is that there are rules as to when they can sell. clearly there's insider trading rules in the US. And so you have to make sure that you're abiding by those rules and selling at periods that you are able to
That you're
sell.
permitted to.
That you're permitted to sell.
Right.
You can't just sell all your company stock willy-nilly. It has to be in accordance with those rules. The third thing there is there's also scrutiny. Analysts that buy company stock, and particularly in publicly traded stock,
Sure.
they're watching what executives are doing.
Right.
So if a company executive went and sold all their company stock, the street analysts would see it and it would be a red flag. And so that could hurt the share price in that way. And so there's all those complications on that side. And then you mentioned on the other side of things where there's hey, this company's great and it's awesome. And that's probably more common.
I agree.
Yeah,
I've seen that movie before.
Yeah, if you work there, and like we said at the top of the episode, we're working with very ambitious and smart people that are trying to do their best for these companies.
Right.
They very much have confidence in themselves and the company, and they should. But what we have to do as financial planners is talk to them about, again, the full picture.
Right.
And hey, sometimes it's better to have a bird in hand than two in the bush. And it doesn't mean you have to sell everything, but sometimes taking a couple of chips off the table and putting them in your pocket is a great way to build wealth over time too, and to protect yourself from the potential shocks of what happens in the broader economy, what happens if something affects the industry that your company's in. It doesn't have to just be something at your company.
Right.
It could be something in the widgets industry that hurts your company. And so
right.
it really is important to consistently evaluate a client or an executive's exposure relative to their net worth and make sure that it's in an area that's comfortable and doesn't hurt their plan because they're overexposed.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've both seen, we could just say the last few years, but my gosh, I mean, I know since we've both been in this industry, we've seen some big generational events or outlier events, and it could be the best run company and not have anything to do with them, but they're in the banking industry or the tech industry, or, like you said, widgets. I know we saw manufacturing has been having its challenges, and that too, with not only are the analysts watching, but with the amount of information that is just so widely available, because we're talking about publicly held companies on today's episode. So anyone, Yahoo Finance, Bloomberg, whatnot, it's really easy to kind of have a short-term whipsaw, and your company could be leading your industry or hitting all its targets or exceeding it. But because they're in that industry, it's a decline. And I just would like to reiterate for our listeners, as Matt mentioned, is when you're at this level, you are required to own a certain level of shares. So even as we're talking to our clients about maybe we want to reduce your exposure or not have you so concentrated in it, you're taking some of the chips off the table. At this point, while you're still working, you're not able to cash it all in. So you lock in some profits today. You're right. The next 3, 4, whatever, 18 quarters continue to be amazing performance. Guess what? You're participating in that upside too.
That's right. You can have your cake and eat it too. In that
yes. Oh, I like that. I like that. All right. As I mentioned at the top of the hour, we're going to have you back for a second episode where we are going to dive deeper into the tax strategies, how you help your clients, how we work with, like you said, making educated decisions about when to cash out, how to cash out, and things like that. Is there anything that you wanted to share in this episode or reiterate?
I don't have a lot. I think we covered most of what I wanted to discuss. Next episode, we can dive deep, as you said, and talk a little bit more about how we resolve some of the complications around these various compensation ideas.
Yeah, I think so, especially when you're starting to look to unwind or you're at a point where you're financially independent. So how do you kind of unwind or cash out in the most favorable ways? Awesome. Well, great. Well, thanks for coming in today.
Thank you, Nicole.
I think as my listeners know, this is a very small slice of Matt's wisdom and knowledge and experience in this area. I think, Matt, when we're wrapping up this episode, I always ask all my guests, where would you most like to live and why? And let's assume you have no financial constraints, no family constraints, time constraints, like literally there's nothing tying you anywhere.
Yes. Well, I mentioned that I do love the outdoors and I love skiing and I love fishing. So you look at where you can do that, and it would probably have to be somewhere like Montana.
Oh, I'm not
It's
surprised.
got both of them. It's got the outdoors. It's got national parks.
Nice.
I think
Skiing, obviously.
it's got skiing and it's got fishing. So I think I would be very happy to live in a place like that.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to come visit. I love it because I'm like, I have all these great places that I'm going to visit. Perfect. Thanks for sharing.
That's great. Matt's going to be moving to Montana soon. All right. That's very nice. Nicole, this is an interesting conversation. I know people are going to want to stick around for part 2, but if they've heard something interesting today and think that they might want to reach out to either you or Matt, how do they reach out to you? What's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, the best way to get hold of either of us, there's 2 ways. One, you can go to our website, which is myprivatevista.com. On our homepage near the top right corner, there's a contact us button. You can just click on that. You can put your information in there. Please refer to this episode, and then either Matt or myself can follow up with you, or you can call 312-831-4370, and our receptionist will be able to direct you to Matt or myself.
Excellent. Thank you. And for those of you who are listening, one of the easiest and quickest things you can do right now is hit subscribe if you are not already a subscriber. That way, if you're interested in part 2, you don't have to think, well, I got to remember when that comes out. If you're a subscriber, you're automatically notified when Nicole drops a new episode of this podcast. So hit subscribe. Until next time, on behalf of Nicole and everybody at My Private Vista, I'm Bill Tucker, thanking you for listening and reminding you that you can go out today and make it a great day, or not. It is your choice. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Dollars and Cents Creating Your Fulfilled Life with Nicole Romito, sponsored by Private Vista. Visit our website at www.myprivatevista.com or give us a call at 312-831-4370. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Private Vista is a group comprised of investment professionals registered with Hightower Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Advisory services are offered through Hightower Advisors, LLC. This is not an offer to buy or sell securities. No investment process is free of risk, and there is no guarantee that the investment process or the investment opportunities referenced herein will be profitable. Past performance is neither indicative nor a guarantee of future results. The investment opportunities referenced herein may not be suitable for all investors. All data or other information referenced herein is from sources believed to be reliable. Any opinions, news, research, analyses, prices, or other data or information contained in this presentation is provided as general market commentary and does not constitute investment advice. Private Vista and Hightower Advisors, LLC, or any of its affiliates make no representations or warranties expressed or implied as to the accuracy or completeness of the information or for statements or errors or omissions, or results obtained from the use of this information. Private Vista and Hightower Advisors, LLC assume no liability for action made or taken in reliance on or relating in any way to this information. The information is provided as of the date referenced. Such data and other information are subject to changes without notice. This was created for informational purposes only. The opinions expressed herein are solely those of the authors and do not represent those of Hightower Advisors, LLC, or any of its affiliates.